I remember hearing about Chronotrigger as a kid. I was far too young to play it, but I knew that the art looked like Dragon Ball Z, which I loved, and that I saw it in a lot of stores. While I preferred games like Ocarina of Time and Pokemon, 20 years later, I'd find that if I'd just given it a try back then, I probably would have liked it a lot. So now, as a 30-something man-child, I wanted to give it a try. But the idea of playing an older RPG is often tedious. It's like deciding whether or not to go for a walk in the park. Yeah, you know it's going to be a fulfilling experience and you'll improve your health and possibly enjoy some nature or something you haven't seen before. But you could just stay at home and continue rotting in seclusion like you have been for 20 years, and that's been working out pretty swell, right? So I took the plunge by setting a goal for myself. For reasons unknown to me, setting a goal on top of a new experience makes it easier to do something. Want to try a new hobby? Tell yourself you gotta wear a silly hat while doing it. To me, that sounds fun. I don't know why. Want to play a 30-year-old JRPG with super complex story elements that doesn't hold your hand? Do it without a guide and see how far you can get. So anyway, I booted up, let's call it my SNES, with air quotes, and got comfortable. Oh my god, I wasn't prepared for just how good the music in the game is. I had heard a lot of people rave about it, but never actually heard it for myself. So, my mom woke me up and asked me for my name for some reason. So I let the game pick the names. I wanted to experience the story to the fullest, so I kept it as Chrono. Okay, so all I knew was that there was a festival going on, and I should go. My first reaction to the festival was, number one, how can a Super Nintendo game look this good? And number two, why the heck are they selling me, presumably a teenager, weapons and armor at a carnival? Okay, so after walking around for a bit, I quickly learned that the game has absolutely no mechanic to guide the player. After all, it's just a JRPG made in the 90s. So, if you forget a piece of dialogue or anything important, you're screwed. I really liked the character Marley in the game. She brings a certain light where a lot of characters are a darker, brooding type. She never lets the darkness get her down. Anyway, she's kind of an archer-healer combo. She's pretty cool. So we do the tutorial fight with a robot, and I hear my favorite song in the game. No, seriously, I don't know why, but it absolutely tickles me in a way that no other jingle has. If I had stopped playing right here, I would have been just as happy. Okay, so long story short, Marlee and I take out Chrono's friend's Luca's robot, and then we go to check out her teleportation machine, and something goes terribly wrong when Marlee tries it out. Her pendant is apparently a key that interferes with time and opens up a portal to the past. Okay, so the game has officially started. So Chrono goes back in time to 600 AD. He doesn't know it yet, but that's where he is. Along the way, I find that most of the buildings were still the same. The map looks a little dingy, and the festival area was gone. I think it's called Lean Square. Anyway, I make my way to the castle because it's the only logical direction, and I do find Marlee. The thing is, the king thought she was the kidnapped Queen Lean, and it screws up time. She gets erased, and now Luca and Chrono have to save the real queen, which is Marlee's ancestor, to save Marlee in the future, which is Chrono's present. This is why I don't like time travel stories. Okay, so Luca and Chrono go to a monastery that was suspicious earlier and kill some baddies and find, without a doubt, the best character in the gosh darn game. I would literally fight anyone who disagrees with me. His name is Frog. He's there to save the queen, of course. With the Frog in the party, I easily crushed the first dungeon. I couldn't believe just how simple it was. I had heard the combat was tough, but this was a cakewalk. In the end, we saved the queen and Marlee, who we now understand is Princess Marlee from our own time. Okay, so at this point in the game, I felt a false sense of safety. I assumed everything would be simple so long as I took mental notes and prepared well enough. This was mostly true. I become extremely sad as Frog leaves the party and we head back to the present. Okay, so we go to the castle with Marley, and for some reason are quickly arrested for treason and kidnapping. Just normal things. Yay. Okay, so this starts the most iconic part of the game for a lot of people, Chrono's trial. It's really well done, and the angle is impressive for the time. Like, really impressive. The music was really good, too. There's a little thing where Chrono has to escape from prison. It's not really important, and for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. But in the end, Marley decides to run away with Chrono and Luca to the future. They end up in, I think, 2600 AD or so, which, by the way, their time is actually 1000 AD, and they met Frog in 600 AD. I know, just bear with me. They meet some future humans who are dying and miserable. They need food and want to go in what would be, I would call, the basement of the building. Of course, I didn't figure that out until after I had gotten completely sidetracked and lost. So after wasting about an hour in a place I didn't actually need to be into yet, I found the basement. It wasn't very hard, but the puzzles did slow me down a lot. The difficulty curve was starting to increase a bit, and I was healing after almost every fight. Restore items are extremely cheap, but having to trek back to the merchants is a massive chore. Also, very important, saving spots are extremely limited in the game. I was so afraid of losing because sometimes it could mean literal hours of gameplay lost because I didn't find the save spot. After fighting a tough robot, Chrono and his gang get to the next exposition dump. Lavos. Like the sweet summer child I was then, I assumed I would be on track to killing him soon. Boy, was I wrong. I got lost a lot more and eventually found the second best character in the game, the Man. He evoked a sense of nostalgia in me that was palpable. It was the kind of nostalgia that you get from hearing those awesome synthwave 80s track style of music being produced today. It's amazing. Lifts you right out of your seat and makes you want to fly to the moon or something. You think about all the good times you had when you were younger and how the younger you would probably be okay with the person you've grown into. Your younger siblings would probably laugh at you, but your younger self was like, yeah, you go, dude. Then you realize that you never actually listened to synth music in your younger days because it wasn't cool at all, and you thought it was super dated because the 80s were your parents' teenage years, and that was like the dinosaur ages, dude. Later, you meet the next party member, Robo. He's pretty good and has the first AoE spell in the game, which had me kick Luca for him really fast. He opens up the final dungeon for the area. It was pretty confusing. I'm not even going to try to euphemize it. I began to get irritated, but I loved every minute of it. I toughed it out and eventually finished the area. It became clear that this Lavos monster was the ultimate goal in the game. I assumed I was nearing the end of the game, though, because the arc wrapped up so nicely here, but I had 11 more hours to go. I know it's hard to imagine, but about 5 hours of real-life game time had passed. Again, I figured I must be getting close to the finale because a lot of RPGs of the time were very doable in one day. Well, I reached the literal end of time, and I was both disappointed and excited. I saw those portals and thought, wow, I've got a lot more content. Then I also thought, crap, this is a time travel game. I'm going to use those portals a lot. So I meet a sleepy time guy and a fluffy guy who teaches me magic. Duh, I should have thought about where magic spells were earned in the earlier game, right? Speaking of the little fluffy guy, he gives you a hint to go from like one edge of the room to the other or something, and I swear I must have run around this room for like 20 minutes before I was about to give up, and all of a sudden it worked, and I swear I had not done anything different. This is the point of the game where a lot of plots open up and I was getting lost. I traveled back in time again, this time, some evil guy called the Magus, or Magus, however you pronounce that, is wreaking havoc on the kingdom. There's apparently a hero who is the promised one who will slay this Magus and restore peace. Magus. I'm going to go with Magus. I kept Robo for this section, as his dark damage was really good, though. So this is where I almost got lost. It turns out that this hero needs a magic sword called the Masumune. It has 2 sentient beings living in it, and is the only way to kill the Magus. So I found it, but it was broken. This act alone took me about an hour of wandering around. Frog's hideout was in the area, and he refused to talk to me. I figured he was the key to the sword, but nope. Anyway, it turns out that the sword is broken and has to be repaired. Turns out that a guy named Melikar, a swordsmith from Chronos time, sort of, can fix it. So I head back to the future, and he tells me it's made of a red stone that, you guessed it, is only available in the far, 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 far past, like Unga Bunga Ooga Dooga caveman time. I think it's like 65,000 years earlier. I knew it wasn't even probably possible, but my motivation for even getting this far in one night was Frog. After seeing him depressed in his little hovel in the swamp, I wanted to see it through. As an RPG, I had a feeling there might be different paths to take, and I was worried I might mess up Frog's redemption arc. I knew he was the real hero, not some dumb kid that's pretending to be Link or something. For the first time in a long time, I started really feeling for the characters in a game. I loved Marley's persistence, Luca's willingness to help others, and Robo's human compassion. The time travel was really interesting because it exemplified their characters in different settings and highlighted their strengths. In fact, their motivation was to stop a monster that comes 1,000 years after they die. I don't think I would be so bold. The strive to go further had me feeling like a kid again. Like I had just taken the Master Sword from the pedestal for the first time in Ocarina of Time. It's this true sense of treasure of circumstance that has me gripped for excellent storytelling. Alright, so true story, no kidding. One of the only times Fortune favored Little Micro was back in like 1997 or 8. Okay, so it was at a Taco Bell because it was cheap and it was a special occasion. Remember those Razor scooter things? They're still around, you know, the ones that bust the hell out of your ankles. Anyway, there was a free giveaway for one of those, and every dollar you spent would get you an entry. Well, my mom spent $2, and my sister and I both entered. Mind, thousands of people probably got a bunch of tickets. Yeah, little me won that sweet Pepsi scooter and was absolutely the peak moment of that year. Finding a good game is like that to me. It's like, hell yeah, other kids on the block. I played a badass game and you're stuck playing Lion King on the Super Nintendo. So something I haven't really mentioned are the fights. Each boss usually has its own little gimmick. So far in the game, the only ones that I had experienced were like target one area before the other. It only takes elemental damage or something, like these Megasaurs. But from now on, nearly every boss has some sort of mechanic that I nearly wipe on. In the not-so-distant future, it will become such a problem that I'll actually double back to find save spots before challenging the boss if I can. And honestly, if not for these bosses, the fights wouldn't be worth mentioning at all. I found that the new party member, Ayla, is kind of a flat character. She's really powerful in melee, but she's got to be one of the least fleshed out characters and didn't have a lot of dialogue. I mean, she is a cave lady, I guess. So, when I could, I kept her on the bench. She does have really good, a good 2-hit combo with Chrono that hits enemies horizontally that carried me a lot. I think it's called Falcon Hit. Anyway, I couldn't get lost here because the game railroaded me into a dungeon to recover Luca's time key thing after Ayla gave me the redstone. So, back to the future again. And so, Luca and Melikar fix the Masumune, and I haul butt and give it to Frog. With the hero's medal that I took from the little Link impersonator, along with the sword, he finally agrees to join my party again. Never leave me, Frog, my boy, my pal. Not only did I get Frog, he gives some exposition about why he's a frog in general. Apparently, his best friend, Cyrus, wanted to become the hero and used the tools to defeat the Magus himself. But unfortunately, he failed, and they cursed Frog, who we now know as Glenn, as a joke. The cut scene really hits hard, and I wanted to kill Magus that night, but I had spent nearly 7 hours on the game already and needed some sleep. And so Frog and Marley had a two-kit combo called Ice Water that just completely destroyed Magus's tower. Magus's first general was called the Flea, and would use a status to confuse, I think. It really wasn't hard. The second guy was called Slash, who was a complete pushover. Again, I'm not really trying to skip fights or anything. They're just really easy to this point. A guy called Oz, who looks a lot like Piccolo, tries to kill you with traps, but they're all really easy too. But there is this one part where he kept dropping me in holes, and oh my god, it made me rage. I'm not even gonna lie. At least his fight is hilarious. It's more of a joke. He ice blocks and you just drop him down a hole, and it's great. Okay, so on to the boss flavor of the week, the Magus. Finally, time for Frog's revenge. So he has a mechanic where he randomly changes elemental resistance. You just have to keep up the party until one of your characters can use a spell against him. So like lightning for Chrono, water for Frog, you get the idea. While you wait, you use Frog to chip his resistance with his magic sword, the Masumune. On the second phase, I bursted him down, and it was over. After the fight, I was given a cutscene that confuses me even today. I think Chrono sees an alternate timeline where he's married to Marley or something. I wonder if it's a future that he unlocks after beating Magus. I'm not really sure. It's super sweet, though. Well, you end back in the past, in, like, the far past, in Ayla's hut, and get back to work. Again, I couldn't really get lost here because the game basically told me to go get a flying dinosaur to ride into the baddie's lair. So the reptile guys want to purge the world of apes. They're at odds. It's just what they do. Their big boss has a pet tyrannosaur. Anyway, they look super imposing as they take up half of the screen, but they're not bad at all. Basically, just take out the little guy and chip the big one until it gives up. At least post-Magus boss fights are getting a little harder. After the fight, we get a cinematic showing how Lavos actually comes from space, of all things. Afterward, the gang ends up in the future, but not a future they've been to yet. It's apparently 1999, right before Lavos crashes to Earth. Now, there's some weirdo people who can summon monsters, and apparently Marley's pendant actually originated from this time, not her time. So, in my mind, the game is giving me some exposition and time to stock up before the big fight. I had a feeling Lavos was right around the corner. Chrono empowers the pendant, which you can use to unlock chests in the past, which is for rare armor, which is pretty neat. Anyway, I confront the queen, and she summons a golem that wipes the party immediately. I think it's unbeatable by the design, though. So, this princess girl and her prophet friend let me escape through a portal that takes me to the distant future. It turns out that someone had built a time machine called Epoch, which I used to get to the year 1999. Hindsight being 2020, and I now see that I probably shouldn't have done that. Why, you ask? Because that's where Lavos destroys the world, obviously. So, I think you can technically kill him here if you're an expert player, which I am not. I give it my best shot, though. I power through his phases, which are all of the bosses I've defeated up to this point. I get extremely far. I'm feeling good. I fight a phase that I haven't seen before, though. It wiped me, as you can see. I just kind of paused the game and walked away. I was so sure I was going to finish the game right there that I was just ready for it. Well, I wasn't ready for the big loss. It took me nearly an hour only to die to Lavos. So when I came back, I was ready to do things right. If there was a point in time where I really needed the guide, it was now. I had spent probably 8 or 9 hours on the first, what I'll call half of the game, and I almost never had an issue. When people told me it's easy to get lost, I figured I was just doing okay because I was making it to a point to remember everything. Well, the way the game begins to unravel into threads of side quests, main story objectives, and personal objectives, for me, it was like obtaining better gear. It becomes an absolute chore. I mean, it really is a chore. In this phase of the game, the difficulty scaling goes way up. If you aren't prepared for the fights, just don't do them. If I couldn't catch on to some mechanic, I'd certainly wipe. Sometimes I reloaded if I had taken too many hits because I was out of recovery items. I think the old man at the end of the time thing gave me some hints about side quests because I ended up in Robo's time and started doing his stuff. I think I sort of just stumbled into the factory where he was made or something. I got so lost in here. What made it so bad was that every time you leave a tunnel or room or something, the monsters would respawn. That's normally not a problem, but when you have to heal so much, you run out of MP and items just really fast. I spent like an hour in here just wandering around before I realized where to go. What I didn't realize was that I probably should have been grinding monsters anyway, so it worked out in the end. Well, Robo gets some exposition this time, and it turns out that his robot brothers think he's malfunctioning because he's not a robot jerk like they are. Anyway, we beat up those robots and head back to the past. Okay, so I'm not even sure if that's the route I was supposed to take now. I don't know, man. This marks the time when I really just start to stumble through the game. So I head back to the Dark Ages, I think, and this time it's been overtaken with those reptile guys. Some of them are friendly, but most are jerks. There's a shop you can go to that's actually owned by a reptile dude, and I didn't realize he was overcharging for items and accidentally spent like 500k on basic healing items. It hurts, man. Alright, so I think I somehow went on to do Robo's actual side quest where he goes back to his factory and you find his girlfriend robot that kicks his butt, but then you kick her butt and her mom's butt or something. I'm not really sure what happened. All I remember is wasting like an hour trying to figure out some buttons, and it was easier than I made it, and it really made me want to look stuff up, but I didn't, so yeah. I got lost as heck doing Frog side quest where you confront the ghost knight thing of his friend Cyrus, and I spent at least an hour before I realized you have to hire a crew of workers to repair the tower. Okay, so Robo also, I think, had yet another side quest, sort of. All I know is that there was some desert because of a worm guy that turned into a skeleton guy, and I spent like 30 minutes trying to figure out why the quest lady wouldn't even talk to me. So I had all my companions talk to her as a last-ditch effort, and eventually I found that Robo actually wanted to stay there for 600 years to plant the forest for her, I guess. Anyway, at this point, I went back and forth in time so much that it's impossible to express what I really did. If it's not abundantly clear, I'm not even now sure the order of things. The main story eventually leads to Chrono and his gang confronting the Queen yet again. This time, things don't go to plan, though. They awaken Lavos and are quickly overwhelmed. You find that the prophet is actually Magus, and that his entire goal in life was to take revenge on the monster. You see, he's actually from 1999 when Lavos initially destroys the world. He and Melikar and the Sage of Time, along with the guy who builds the Epoch, are sent to different corners of time. Chrono then dies. I was really surprised. I didn't think the protagonist of a game would ever be killed off. The gang is then captured by the Queen's captain, Dalton. He kind of proclaims himself lord of his time after the Queen abandons him. They're then trapped on board his kind of looks like an airplane. He steals the epoch and upgrades it for his own usage, but you kick him off of the epoch and escape in the end. Shortly after, Frog has an exchange with Magus that I liked a lot. He gets to choose whether or not to kill Magus and take his revenge, or instead end the chain of suffering by letting him live. I know this entire process has been full of spoilers, but I'm just going to say that they do bring Chrono back to life. I'm not going to say how. I'd like for you to experience it for yourself. It's really clever, and I liked it a lot. I have a feeling it's completely optional, too. Like, the gang could go and challenge Lavos without him, or at least I hope so. Anyway, in the end of time, if you talk to Magus, he'll tell you about a helper, an evil guy friend of his that apparently lives in a tower. Well, anyway, I went and dealt with that guy, too. It wasn't hard or anything. I don't even remember anything about it, to be honest. Anyway, that was Magus' side quest, I think. All the while I spent like an hour trying to figure out where to buy jerky or something for a quest about the prism shell thing. The prism shell quest involves going forward in time, where I explored an island and killed a weird fire monster, and the game pretty much told me to go all the way back in time and dump the stone in a cave, and oh yeah, that's why I needed the jerky. I had to give it to a crooked mayor's mom so that she would raise him better. I kind of hated that part. So at the end of the quest, you go to Chrono's time, and they had apparently arrested Marley's dad, the king, so you have to prove he didn't actually steal the shell, which you yourself put back in time, and they inherited. And it turns out that the Chancellor guy that arrested Chrono before is actually the descendant of the very first boss from the cathedral, and he's doing it all for revenge. It was a really funny thing to see. Marley jumps through the stained glass window. You kill him. It's great. The reward for the prism shell is that Melikar makes you some armor. I chose the regular armor, but then reloaded to see what the helmets did. They gave status protection, so I took those instead. Okay, so all caught up, I think. Basically, I made it to the near end, was getting frustrated, throwing myself at monsters who were perpetually getting harder. Like these miniature Lavos guys were just so hard. I just tanked their hits and crossed my fingers most of the time. At some point, I went back to the sleepy old guy at the end of time, and he said I still had one more quest, and I was just so over it, dude. Looking back now, I think it was Chrono's side quest. I still don't know how to do it. I was pulling my hair out at this point. I just wanted to finish Lavos so bad. I said, screw it, I'm heading to 1999. The game tells you that there are more than one ways to actually fight Lavos. Like, you can challenge the Queen Lady again on the spaceships in any timeline. I chose 1999 because I wanted a rematch against the Lavos Various I wiped on. Okay, so it was time. My pride was crushed and my eyes bloodshot. I wanted to be released from Chronotrigger. I needed to see it through. With the new gear and levels, Lavos' first few phases were surprisingly easy. I crushed it. Well, I thought I did. He actually has yet another phase where you go inside a shell. It looks like a spaceship or something, which does make sense if you think about it. If you didn't figure it out yet, Lavos has basically been playing Earth. He's a time-consuming sort of entity that feeds on the strength of other living beings. Hence the shell phase being just bosses you'd already beaten. Anyway, this form was simple. I killed the arms and bonked the head, I think. Easy peasy. So this is where I was defeated, both in-game and out. Lavos' final form is an absolute dumpster fire. It broke me. You see, the mechanic goes like this. You gotta keep one of those little floating squid things dead, or Lavos uses an ultimate move that wipes you. The thing is, you're supposed to be way stronger than I was, I think. It took me at least 2 characters or 2 turns to kill one of those things. So what would happen is, I'd get overwhelmed way too fast. Here's the other thing. The squid on the right side is actually the real Lavos. The humanoid version is a trap. I died here for an hour straight. I gave up, man. It sucks to say now because I was so close, but I figured I had skipped something yet again and wasn't supposed to be on Lavos like I had earlier in the game. Well, I did look it up. I was so absolutely crushed to find that I was indeed in the right spot, but that I just wasn't persistent enough. I didn't even look at how to kill it, just that it was possible. Well, 3 attempts later, I finally beat him. I just kind of got lucky. I took my bittersweet loss in the challenge. I was really happy that I played such an old game without the aid of the internet. I'm sure folks back in the 90s used one of those game guide books or magazines or whatever, but I really wanted to do it alone. I think it's fair to say that, yeah, you can beat Chronotrigger without a guide, but no, I did not. I mean, I was so close. Ugh. In the end, I really liked the game. I think if I gave it more time and just had fun with it over the course of a month like I had Pokemon or Zelda as a kid, it would have been way more fun. I would have found way more Easter eggs and fun little bits and characterizations, but I wanted it to be over just a few days. The post-game was one of the most satisfying endings ever, though. It was like watching friends you made over the summer return home, probably never to see again. It left me utterly satiated. The story was just so good, man. I know this is just a dumb challenge run, but storytelling is where my heart is. I never believe the hype on anything until I read, play, watch, listen to it, or whatever. Man, this one is just really good. If you made it this far, you're awesome. You might consider subscribing and giving this video a like if you'd like to see more, though. Thanks again, and remember, you can go back in time anytime. You don't need a time machine for that.